Welcome. This is a special episode of Wireless LAN Professionals podcast. I'm here with Joe Hillis. We met Joe Hillis a couple years ago at the WLPC in Dallas. He brought his bus there. And right now, Joe, where are you?
We're actually in Rockport, Texas, at the eye of where Hurricane Harvey struck. I'm sorry.
And I'm guessing you have that bus plus your new one.
Actually, that particular bus is over in Houston. So as you know, this thing kind of barreled its way up the coast, and so there's a whole other response going on over in the Houston area. But we're actually in our newer bus. We got right after that. The last time we were all together in Dallas.
Well, good. I thought it would be appropriate to have a special podcast here right after Hurricane Harvey to see if we could get some information from folks on the ground. You're obviously there on the ground, as well as see if I could garner some support from our audience to help you out at all. So are you good for a couple minutes to do a little podcast with us?
Absolutely. Would love to. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Well, I have a couple questions, and all you have to do is answer. It's really easy. First, a little personal background. How did you get involved in this disaster recovery bits?
Actually, I'm one of the co-founders of ITDRC, which started back in 2008. The history of the organization goes back to 9/11, the post-9/11 initiative, which was to bring people from the private tech sector in to help communities after a disaster. So something that I was really interested in and actually got involved in it through ITDRC back in 2008.
And what did you do before you were part of ITDRC?
Early career, I was a firefighter. I retired from the fire service, but concurrently, starting back in the late 80s, I got into the IT world. So I ran government IT for some local municipalities in North Texas, and then moved up into enterprise IT and before I retired to take on this role.
Well, that sounds like you didn't get much retirement out of that.
It's true.
At least
I'm
a
glutton for punishment.
Tell us, what's it like on the ground there? You've been there, right there, ground zero, so to speak.
We have. It's actually, we're still without power. The whole community is without power. Pretty much without water in most of the area here. It's a super slow recovery related to, as compared to, a typical tornado type disaster or even just a typical hurricane, which, comes and goes, in a matter of, hours, if not, a day or two. This particular one hung around for a week. And it just kind of dumped a whole lot of rain. And so that slowed resources. A lot of the resources for this area would come out of Corpus Christi or Houston. Fortunately, Houston was totally paralyzed and is largely in many ways now. So I guess you would say it's kind of primitive technology restoration right now. It's just the essential services. Still having some trouble with cell. Some of the major carriers are down still at this point. So a lot of, like I say, a lot of baling wire and duct tape to keep these guys operational now.
Well, what's the for some of our audience, they might not know what your mission is, and who's your target audience? Who do you try to support?
Good question. So we follow the phases of disaster. So the first phase of a disaster is technically the preparation phase. So that's the mitigation phase, if you will. These are the things that we can do in advance of a disaster to mitigate the damage. So it's a role that we play through community education, through connecting with the tech community. The first really phase that most people are aware of is the response phase. And that's from the time an emergency actually happens until the threat has been mitigated. So if it's for a wildfire, for example, that's from the time the fire starts until the fire is put out. In the case of a big response like this, it's from the time the hurricane begins to threaten the area with the outer bands of the rain, until basically the people have all been accounted for. So that's what they call the response phase. During the response phase of an emergency, we support public safety, critical sites, critical functions to be able to, help the EMS with life safety, help the police and fire departments communicate, things like that. So after that phase, the response phase, then we move into the mass care is what we do. And so that's the sheltering, the feeding and sheltering of all the evacuees or the survivors. And so we've got a very active role in all parts of the state, from the DFW area down to Austin, Houston, helping put Wi-Fi in the shelters, putting telephones in the shelters, as well as notebooks and things like that to keep the people stay connected. And then we'll move eventually into the recovery phase, and that's where we try to get people out of the shelters and back into some sort of temporary housing that will be for long-term, to get them into a safe environment where they can begin the long-term recovery, which could take years after that. So through each of those phases, we help different populations, like I said, public safety during the response phase, and then for the mass care efforts there, and then the last phase, which will be the recovery part. And that's everything from volunteer efforts, volunteer and donations management, for all the people that are donating products and services, as well as the volunteers that are coming to these communities. We provide infrastructure for those efforts, as well as for the long-term recovery. So that's kind of how we do in each role.
Well, ITDRC has been around for almost a decade now. And how many recoveries have you worked on, disasters?
You caught me off guard on this one. I can tell you that we're probably around, I think we say 75 events, give or take, several hundred sites that we've done in hundreds, and I say hundreds. We're well over 100 communities, probably pushing 100 communities or 150 communities that we've actually delivered service in. So, the first couple of years, as with any business, its business is slow. So it's really been picking up steam, and largely just due to reputation, here in the last few years.
Well, I'm guessing this one's a little bit larger than some of the others you worked on.
It is. To date, we've had a couple of significant ones. Last year was what we thought was our largest one, which was the West Virginia flooding. We covered about 1,200 square miles, and we did, a couple dozen sites around the state there. Obviously, Hurricane Sandy was a huge one, but that we were concentrated right there in the New Jersey and New York state area, or New York City area. So, but yes, this one will far exceed geographically. This one exceeds all of our other responses so far, and it's definitely going to be one for the record book.
Well, changing topic just a little bit. After you came and talked to WLPC, there was I know I went through, and a couple other people I'm sure as well went through some ICS and NIMS kind of training. What kind of training do you have your volunteers go through?
We have some internal training that starts with the orientation about the organization, about the types of services that we provide, the resources that we have available for that. And then we get kind of specific down even into some of the types of equipment used. So there are certainly some organizational type trainings and there's technical trainings, but for the people that want to deploy into the field, we strongly encourage FEMA has a core set of training. We call it the Core 4, and that's basically what the incident command system is, what our role is, and I'll just give you an example of that. As you probably learned through your training, that if you have a question, I think most people would think, well, let me just go right to the incident commander because he'll give me the answer. But that part of this incident command training, tells you that, when you're in the communications and the tech team, you roll up to the logistics branch, and so you have a different kind of pathway. And so that's really why we encourage that, just to make sure that everybody is aware of how these are structured organizationally, particularly because, we work with people all over the country that we've never worked with before. And so the ICS framework is kind of our common ground for us to understand, where we get our instructions, where, who we report to, and how to handle some of those things procedurally.
Great. Well, by the way, I just thought that was wonderful that you required training so that we get all on the same page. You work off a region system. Tell us a little bit about how your regions work.
We do. So we're a national organization. We have members in many, many, many states, and most of the states, actually. So we divide the country into three sections. We have a Western Division, a Central, and an Eastern Division. And so underneath that, we follow the standard FEMA 10 region plan. That helps us, kind of organize our people in a standard methodology for the emergency management world. If we say somebody's from Region 7, then everybody, in the emergency management world knows that is. So it really does help us, break our membership into smaller groups, and so they're able to do things regionally that don't necessarily involve. And one of the things that I have learned, Keith, over the years is that the culture, the Silicon Valley culture and the New York tech culture is totally different than the Heartland tech culture, and so that's one of the other things too that kind of keeps like members together. But right now we have 25 plus people deployed on the ground here, and they're from all corners of the country, from all tier one through mom and pop employers, and so this is our time to come together and work together as one team.
Well, not meaning to take too much of your time, just a final question here. What do you need? If someone's thinking right now, how can I get involved? What do you need?
Well, a couple things. Our biggest thing is they need patience. They need patience from everybody. Right now while this thing is really burning up the news cycle, everybody's anxious to deploy. They know that we've got a skill set. We want to do something. We know there are hundreds of shelters, and there are tens of thousands of people in these shelters, and so. So what we need is patience to understand, to let us receive the request for assistance. If you think about this, a lot of these folks are in, for example, in Houston, they're in the NRG Stadium, and they have the perfect wireless infrastructure and backhaul to take care of those people. So, we've had people say, hey, we're happy to go out to NRG Stadium and put Wi-Fi in there. Well, it's already there. So what we're waiting for is for some of these temporary these services to be restored in temporary facilities. And I can tell you from being here on the ground that a lot of these people, especially in the areas that we're in now, these are small 2- and 3-person IT shops for sometimes the cities, for the counties and whatever. They need the help to recover, but it also has to be done. They have also suffered damage on their homes. Some of these people that that we're working with even this evening, meeting with, these are IT directors for cities and counties that lost their own homes. So they've got to take care of their home life. They got to take care of their communities as well, their employers. So what we, right now, we need your commitment of resources. If you want to send something, if your employer wants to send something, just let us know what you have available. Let us put it, let us catalog it. We promise we'll find a good home for it if it's a match. The main thing is, we've pre-staged a lot of resources. There's been a lot of, there's been a couple of, large vendors in the wireless world that have provided us with some advanced shipments of stuff. So right now we have hundreds of APs available to us that are staged in different parts of the state. But there probably won't be enough. And so we're going to need, not only in the months to come, and this isn't today's to come, in the months to come, we're going to need equipment. We're going to need volunteers to come out and do the service projects and help these folks. And we're going to need dollars. I mean, just the bottom line. I hate asking for dollars. If there was ever a good time to support a cause for boots on the ground, it's now. People sometimes want to send us. Excuse me. The other day, somebody said, "Hey, we need 2 cases of tape, of duct tape or gaff tape." And so they're like, well, we'll go buy it and we'll ship it to you. Where do you want it shipped? And the best thing that they could do at this point is just send us a $25 Home Depot gift card. Let us just buy it locally. It puts money into the economy, and we don't have to worry about, shipping it, worrying about it getting lost in shipping and waiting 3 or 4 days for it. So there's lots of ways to be involved and volunteer. I mean, go register at ITDRC.org. We've got people right now, and a couple of the HR people who are processing folks quickly. Just because you get processed doesn't mean we're going to task you right now to come down here. Chances are, we know of some of these service projects that we've done in the Houston and the area from last year's flooding. Those people have already called us. They've already told us, hey, we've got 2 schools that took 7 foot of water on. So we're already sourcing equipment, whether it's core switches, whether it's wireless stuff, whether it's controllers and things like that. We're already working on sourcing equipment for them for when they either A, get back into their facility, or B, when they have to get into a temporary facility somewhere. So just know that we have a lot of things in motion. We certainly welcome anybody in the industry to get involved. Probably one of the most rewarding things you're ever going to do in your career is come out and help somebody recover from nothing. So I'll leave it there and just hopefully we invite the wireless community to come join us.
Well, there's a huge need, and we have a community of people who have skills, and obviously most of us have some money that we could spare and help out. So I appreciate your time. I know you're literally draining the swamp, and we appreciate all the work you're doing up there. And hopefully we can pass the word around and let people know that you need a little patience in the short term, but in the long term, more assets of equipment, people, money, time, all will go for a good cause. So, Joe, you're doing a good job.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate the community and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks for your time. Now, you heard Joe. Go to itdrc.org, itdrc.org, and sign up. And there's a donate button on the right side. Go ahead and if you can help out these folks down in southern Texas. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.